Welcome to Uncommon Core, where we explore the big ideas in crypto from first principles. This show is hosted by Su Zhu, CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Three Arrows Capital, and me, Hasu, a crypto researcher and writer. This is part 2 of our conversation with Matti and Fiskantes of Zee Prime Capital. While the first half was more philosophical in nature, this time we talked exclusively about different blockchain projects and how they might connect to each other in the future. I believe that with gas fees in Ethereum being as high as they are right now, the advent of sharding and layer 2 solutions, and the first credible Ethereum competitors like Polkadot, Cosmos and Solana coming to mainnet, this topic has never been more relevant. In this episode we covered why Zee Prime invests in Polkadot and its ecosystem, different approaches to interoperability, Binance Smart Chain, and what role Bitcoin and Ethereum will play in a multi-chain future. I actually want to talk to you about Polkadot because Polkadot is is a top 5. I haven't checked for like a week or so, but it's a project that's very high in the rankings. It has a very large community, but nonetheless, it is quite difficult to find good information about the state of its ecosystem. And as we covered in the first part, these investments are actually all about narrative and the memes. And so the community is always like a really important part of the thesis for me when I want to invest in something. That's why I think it's great to have two people here who like have a lot of experience with the Polkadot ecosystem and can tell us something that we might not be able to learn on Twitter necessarily. From what I know, you're one of the bigger investors in the Polkadot ecosystem. Can you quickly summarize how Polkadot's architecture and vision differ from that of Ethereum? Because we have a lot of listeners who are very intimately familiar with Ethereum, but may not be with Polkadot.
Yeah, maybe just let me give you a brief kind of intro to Polka. Like, how did we come across Polka? So for me, it's more of a personal thing. So I actually read the paper, the what I don't know. It was the first white paper. I think it was like December 2016. Uh, like crypto was a new thing for me back then, and actually the first crypto fund that I was involved with, like Gavin was an advisor. So throughout 2017 and 2018, I had the privilege of talking to him, and for me it was very much also like a personal bet. So I saw this person. I know that Gavin, like he gets like he's a bit of a controversial figure. So but I saw this entrepreneur, and for me, the way he talked about the project, the way he talked about Polkadot was something that sort of instilled this conviction within me. So I was lucky to be there early and to kind of see the vision very early on. And Gavin saw it. I think he even discussed it publicly as kind of the original vision of Ethereum, and that was something that stuck with me. And for me, it was a bet on the founder of the project from the get go. And then, as thing kind of progressed, I saw that these visions are materializing. And when Substrate, this kind of the tooling for Polkadot was released. I mean, it was clunky and all that, but when we had some of our dev friends have a look at it, they were impressed. So so it was, you could say that I was lucky to be there early on, and to kind of had this bias instilled in me because I was around this founder. Um, and then it kind of funny thing is that we actually Z Prime founders, co-founders, and partners, we have all first met at a Polka event that actually sort of I wasn't running it. Well, I sort of created this event in Bratislava, Slovakia. It was like mid to late 2018. It was before Web3 was even doing Polkadot meetups. It was Polkadot, Ocean Protocol, and Hive.1 event. So and we all met there. I mean, we didn't sort of like, I think Fisky, he thought that I'm some kind of polka shill, and he was very skeptical about me first. And it was like, actually Jacob, that kind of connected us later on, because we also met there. So chance played a role there. So I don't want to say that maybe if I was closer to a, I don't know, Cardano founder, I would have a different bias or something like that. So it all started with a chance. But then, the thesis was kind of confirmed. So I'll let maybe Fisky to kind of elaborate on that.
No, I just add that I'm still probably the most skeptical guy when it comes to Polkadot from our crew. So I still try to poke holes. Um, I remember just reading the white paper in during the ICO. Was it 2018 or 17? I don't even remember. But it was like huge buzzword bingo. They made up a lot of terms like fishermen collators, and I was really confused. And I thought it doesn't make any sense. So I passed on that. And it yeah. And when I met Matti, it was interesting, but Cardano seemed much more interesting to me technically for some reason during that time. Um, it was only like what 1 year 1 year ago when I really started to appreciate the tech and the vision behind it. Um, I remember ETH Berlin 2019, when Polkadot had its own conference, .con, and Cardano held some sort of a small event somewhere with community, and the community were like three guys in a suit who looked really beaten down and tired, and Polkadot was this lively ecosystem of really smart guys and developers, even from Ethereum and elsewhere, who were really like um, eager to build something on Polkadot. So this is where it first kind of clicked for me. Um, I'm also very interested in governance experiments. Like I wrote an article about governance where I kind of dug deeper into DAOs and some sort of it's like experiments on decentralized consensus layers and smart contracts. And I think like one of my bigger criticisms around Polkadot is that its governance seems a bit over-engineered, especially so early when there is no real validation that it really works. And they made it a bit more complicated. And I kind of feel that they may be focused more on like this power structure and like this governance side of things than some other aspects that are maybe more important. On the other hand, especially being close to guys from Hydra DX, I see a lot of unique features that Substrate and Polkadot offers that other like layers or platforms really don't offer and are nowhere near offering. So I'm getting more bullish on it as time goes, with some reservations, of course. And yeah, being part of Zee Prime, you can't really be too bearish on Polkadot because you wouldn't last too long. I'm just kidding. Um, so yeah, so that's my personal experience with it so far.
Maybe to kind of what people often, I don't want to say don't get, but when starting to explain Polkadot, um, I don't like being it framed as another L1 or being a Ethereum killer. Um, I always kind of try to explain it as like layer zero,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a layer, I don't know, below or above, but it's like Ethereum could be a part of Polkadot. I mean, in theory. So you have this kind of relay chain that is kind of connecting the universe of Polkadot. Then you have different sort of what they call parachain, being on top of the relay, connected for relay, which kind of allows you to have this joint security, or this kind of big. Um, I think Fisky, how did you put it? Like it's a NATO or something like that.
Yeah. I have this. I mean, it's analogy, and analogies are usually like pretty weak arguments, but I like it because it kind of explains it pretty well. Um, Ethereum, in my eyes, is like centralized empire with one laws, one consensus layer, and everybody tries to build businesses within that empire, and maybe have some colonies like some sidechains or layer twos outside of it as well. Cosmos is another extreme where all these app specific chains called zones in Cosmos, they are like independent. They need to bootstrap their own security, have their own validator set, and they then connect freely via some sort of let's call it trade agreement. So they are like independent nations within a free trade zone, but they still need to figure out their own like security and rules by themselves. And Polkadot is somewhere in the middle where you have these like semi-independent entities called parachains where they can build their like layer from ground up, but then they if they want to be connected to the overall Polkadot ecosystem, they need to be part of this security alliance, something like NATO, where they pay some tax or some tribute to the ecosystem in forms of dots, paying for parachain slots, or like bonding dots in parachain slots, and for that they get shared security and like better composability with the rest of the ecosystem. What some people don't understand about Polkadot is that you can have your own blockchain built on Substrate, which can then communicate with maybe the rest of Polkadot, maybe with Cosmos ecosystem or with Ethereum, and you don't have to have parachain slot. So it's an option. So let's say Hydra DX aims to be a parachain, of course, but if we didn't get it somehow, if Hydra wasn't a parachain, it still could serve as an independent substrate-based chain with its own validators, with its own security, and it could still work quite well. It doesn't have to be like this part of this inner circle if it doesn't want to, but it brings a lot of benefits. So obviously, we and like almost everyone else in the Polkadot ecosystem tries to be a parachain.
So the way I understand the parachains is that you don't just have one application per parachain, right? You might have one DeFi ecosystem that is one parachain.
Yes.
So, and you're saying that Hydra DX is a project that you're incubating. It's a decentralized exchange. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what is the logic there to getting your own parachain instead of joining some pre-existing DeFi parachain?
I really wish like some more technical guys would be here from Hydra, but there are some parachains that are generalized. So they are like Ethereum. They are smart contract friendly, and you can build stuff on top of them. Something like Moonbeam, and actually, I think SushiSwap is extending itself into Moonbeam to be part of Polkadot ecosystem this way without needing to be a parachain or anything like it. But when you design something which is more complex, let's say, and which is probably which aims to be an integral part of the infrastructure, I think it's very beneficial to build it from the ground up, to design your own consensus and to kind of run your own chain, because then you are able to tweak a lot of parameters which you wouldn't be able to tweak if you were built on some separate base layer, where you inherit all the flaws and design choices of that base layer. Like Ethereum is a good example. You can't really mess with block time, right? If you are just building a smart contract project on top of it. But when we are building Hydra, we don't think about it as just another DEX, like some, I don't know, some Uniswap clone. It's very different from it. The design is much different, and we think about it as a liquidity layer for Polkadot ecosystem, and maybe the future of finance in the future. So for that reason, there are a lot of things you can really play with. One short example is that when you have an exchange, you can have multiple types of transactions. Some of them are just simple trades, and others may be, let's say, liquidations. And when you are building it from the ground up, you can actually differentiate between these type of transactions, and you can, let's say, prioritize them in a different way. You can just you are not forced to just accept them in a simple order. You can play with it more. You can maybe assign them different fees or different auction parameters or something like that.
I just wanted to add that basically this means you don't have to compromise the use case because of the underlying tech. Right, you build a tech for a specific use case, and if you're building this liquidity chain, parachain, hopefully, you can, these critical issues, DeFi critical issues, can be prioritized, say on a consensus level. So, increasing chance of executing even in harsh condition, etc. So, um, it allows you to to sort of to custom build a technology for the specific applications that hopefully will emerge on top.
And yeah, there is this larger point. Maybe you have read the article from Multicoin Capital, which is basically their Solana investment thesis, which says that the world computer should be architecturally centralized, meaning that all the projects, all the DeFi or like crypto financial projects should have like common shared layer, below them, and it should be like super fast and scalable and all the jazz. But I mean, we are bullish on Solana. We are investors in Solana, and we really think it's a great ecosystem, and it will be a big player in the future. Even now, it already becomes one. But I don't think that this is how the world will like unfold, or the world of crypto. I really believe that there are enough reasons for projects to build their own application-specific chains, and they may connect to Cosmos, they may connect to Polkadot, they may choose some other way, but eventually we will see like all this heterogeneous future of some big single specific use case chains, or maybe some generalized chains like Ethereum that will be used for a launchpad, as a launchpad for ideas and for quick bootstrapping of ideas. And then maybe this DeFi protocols which are built on Ethereum, they will span multiple ecosystems. They will try to, I don't know, bootstrap their own validator set and become their own chain, and kind of basically what I'm saying is it won't be neat and elegant and unified one layer and then multiple apps on top of it, but it will be a huge mess of all these different kind of solutions for various reasons. And like even financial use cases, there are so many of them, and they are so sometimes specific that being constrained to one layer and its rules, even though the layer could be super fast, it's still very limiting, and it doesn't unlock the full potential of what crypto offers.
So two things that I've become very skeptical about over the last years. One, the first thing that people get disillusioned about is scalability, right? When they realize that scalability is actually distinct from throughput, and it's not actually scalability if you scale the throughput while also scaling the need to consume resources, for example, making it harder for people to run nodes in the network. And then you immediately realize that all these transactions per second numbers are actually completely meaningless, right? That all the new projects code that specialize in that. But the other one, and that's kind of where this hooks into our topic, is interoperability. It was a very popular narrative for the last years that like interoperability between blockchains will be possible. It's always right around the corner. And I feel like your entire thesis around Polkadot kind of hinges on this idea that parachains can communicate with each other like in a seamless way. And for example, it's not enough, right, that you can communicate with like a 1 minute delay or whatever, right? That's already not great because it breaks the atomicity of transactions. So I'm kind of interested how that works, and if you have actually seen any real proof that communication between parachains is actually as seamless as they say.
Yeah, well, I will start with the first point, because it will be a quick one. We are seeing even now the generalized layers, even though they could be scaling like to high TPS. If you have too many dexes on top of one layer, and Hayden Adams pointed it out recently on Twitter, there will always be arbitrage opportunities, and that means that the more dexes you have, the more like price differences you occur, the more trading activity happens. And on Ethereum right now, it seems like it looks like a cancer a bit. Like there is growth in number of dexes and number of trading pairs and trades, but the growth is killing the host. It's not healthy anymore. The marginal new dex that is launched on Ethereum is harming the space more than it's like helping anything. So this is one of the reasons why, even though you may have like super high TPS, you will reach this limit sooner or later. Like even Binance Smart Chain, it's basically Ethereum with much higher throughput because it's like centralized. But even there, if there will be too many like dexes and too much trading activity going on, it will consume all the block space nonetheless, and there is no easy redemption for it. Just to separate, the various use cases on their own chains and validator sets, and kind of make them talk to each other in some way. Maybe some of them won't even be like fully composable with everything else. Maybe they will be partially composable, and they will have delays in some cases, not just for like scalability reasons, but also from the perspective of being secure, because a lot of these things are less secure because of composability. And I will let Matti answer the second question about Polkadot interop.
Yeah, so the XMP, the sort of the cross-chain message passing is still not launched. So this is a critical component that will be released hopefully very soon. First, probably on Kusama, and then on Polkadot as well. So that is a feature that sort of enables Relay to function natively. And there's a difference, right, between having a sort of this Relay, having this cross chain message passing, and having a bridge, because bridge is something that you have to build again, right? And still, we have very few working trustless bridges in crypto. Um, so it's, I mean, interoperability, as you said, is always around the corner. But I believe it is this year when we actually see this happening, and I mean, Polkadot in a way is just a another take on sharding, um, where you have these parachains being sort of their own chart, their own charts, and it's all of these are just different kind of framing of the same kind of solution, and we don't know how it's going to look at the end, right? And what I believe is the future is like very kind of flexible stack, um, so layered stack and very flexible. So I can imagine that um, there might be application that will be using different layers, and you might not even know what layers you're actually using, what kind of middleware will be involved in that. And yeah, that is also part of our kind of middleware thesis. So but interoperability is I, I believe this year we'll see big things.
We also have IBC from Cosmos being rolled out finally with Stargate update, which I mean, I'm just starting to play with Cosmos ecosystem right now as well, to see how it works. What is the state of wallets and the ecosystem in general. And I think it will be maybe even less than a year, maybe 6 months, and we will be sure if it's working, or if it's like, if it needs another couple of years, and then we can go back to some like shabby bridges. Bridges are hard to build.
Yeah.
Everybody early in Polkadot ecosystem was like saying, yeah, someone will build a bridge and we will just bridge it and it will be fine. And now people realize like bridges are hard, and
Yeah.
there is probably only one really decentralized bridge between two smart contract ecosystems, and that's Ethereum and Near protocol. Um, and the sad thing is that
The
Near,
Rainbow Bridge.
yeah. I think that one is ahead of anything else. Everything else is much more reliant on some centralized party.
How does it? Can you remind me how it works again?
Not really right now. I would need to dig it up. But I remember reading it that it kind of it uses smart contracts on both ends that just lock assets, and it kind of works well together. Um, but the thing is that Near doesn't have nearly as much traction as and hype as other ecosystems. So we may not see it being too used very soon. I hope it will get used and tested in practice, because that's always what matters. Everyone has this like cool technology put in the paper, and maybe even on some proof of concept production, but only under heavy load you can see what really works and what doesn't.
Yeah, and there are also like different concepts of of building bridge. Like you can. I think what they say is that the bridging to proof of stake system is easier, right, than bridging Ethereum with Near or with Polkadot. Um, but I think that if we go back to Cosmos, as Fisky was mentioning, um, most teams that most, I don't want to say capable teams, but the most capable teams that we saw, we invested in, building on Tendermint, have no allegiance to Cosmos ecosystem. Like there's no Cosmos ecosystem. I mean, maybe there is, but like Polkadot with its first like Web3 summit, like you could already see that there's an actual kind of identity of Polkadot. And but where do do you even know that Torchain is like took Tendermint and like completely changed it, or Poct? These are very technically capable teams. And granted, I mean, Tendermint was there much sooner than Substrate. But then again, like I don't know how much. I mean, I know that a lot of effort went into sort of changing the kind of the core tech that they took from Tendermint, right? So that's a big difference, right? That like I think Cosmos is kind of trying to replicate what Polkadot has done right now, because they realized that their approach probably wasn't. I don't know whether there was an intent to create a community or not, but Polkadot started as this identity, and now they're sort of trying to. They're now technically bridging these different projects within the system, whereas Cosmos just um, I mean, didn't really have that. Like, as in, the Tendermint and Cosmos wasn't as much connected as Substrate and Polkadot. I mean, that's my perspective. So maybe I'm wrong, but this is how I see it.
One way to look at it is that Cosmos is a bit less coordinated, but a bit more decentralized and grassroots, because it doesn't have this, it doesn't have a Schelling point asset like Dot. It has Atom, but you don't need Atom to start being a part of even inner Cosmos ecosystem. And it doesn't have such a big backing of entities such as Web3 Foundation and Parity. So it's a bit more grassroots. It will take a bit more time. It will be much more messy, I would say. And like, let's not kid ourselves. Even Ethereum, which is right now the pinnacle of everything, it 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 got pretty bootstrapped, like pretty much bootstrapped by Joe Lubin and Consensus, and they poured a lot of money into the space to build developer tooling, which is one of my other like strong opinions that TPS and all the jazz doesn't matter too much if you don't have like really good developer tooling, so developers can build cool stuff very quickly, experiment and roll out new features very quickly on your chain, which like Ethereum is like light years ahead of everything else. And that's why we have seen like Binance chain being built on Tendermint, not getting too much traction. And then they built Binance Smart Chain, which is basically a clone of Ethereum, so they can copy all the dev tooling and all the smart contracts from Ethereum without too much like hassle. So
Oh, I didn't even know that Binance pivoted from the Tendermint
no,
chain.
they
But yeah,
still,
that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, it's kind of messy. They still have both. So they have like Binance
Yeah.
Chain and Binance Smart Chain. For example, if you interact with Torchain, you can do it via BEP, which is like the Tendermint chain. But
Yeah.
a lot of this new stuff like Pancake Swap and all these like um, clones of Uniswap and other projects which are popping on Binance chain now are popping on Binance Smart Chain. So they have two blockchains. One is Tendermint and one is Ethereum clone.
Yeah, and when we talk about Tendermint, that's also kind of unclear, right? Because you wonder what the play is there. Because I think Paradigm is invested in Tendermint, so you can say that Cosmos ecosystem has a major player backing them. But I don't know what the play is there. So it's pretty interesting to see it play out.
They from what I understand, they realized that any any concrete chain to become a hub or this dominant player and to accrue value, they need to have a deep liquidity. That's why Atom and or Cosmos, the chain, is also building B Harvest, which is like liquidity protocol for Cosmos. And there is Tor chain as well, which is like part of Cosmos ecosystem loosely set. So yeah, liquidity. I think liquidity is the key for all of these projects, and it's kind of it's cliche to build a DEX now. There are so many DEXs with so many flavors, and even with Hydra, we kind of feel that we are already in a pretty red ocean. However, we are proud to say that Hydra is like very different from anything else, and we really believe that liquidity is one of the key properties of decentralized finance, and that the best solution should accrue a lot of value, and this is the backbone of DeFi, like having deep and maybe even like capitally inefficient and redundant liquidity.
I just wanted to add that it's very interesting how, like 2017 was kind of, or even slightly before that, there was a lot of macro bullshitting, like, Fed protocols. I mean, like, for the time was like great, interesting, right? But it was like sort of replaced by this very kind of particular, I don't want to say micro masturbation, but DeFi, very specific things, AMMs, etc. And it's almost as like an overcompensation from like these like Web3 general thesis to like very specific things. And now we're trying to maybe perhaps correct and try to get into like find a balance there. Um, so it's very interesting how it evolves, and like even understanding AMMs and the very kind of nuances and the small differences between all of them. It takes a lot of time, and you have to have some pre-existing knowledge of financial markets and etc.
And the promise is with something like Polkadot and Cosmos, right? I think it's that if anyone launches a token, even if it's on a different parachain, then they can still natively access that token on your parachain, right? So every token is available on every parachain.
Yeah, I think that's the end game, but there are some reservations to it. Like I said earlier, sometimes the composability is not desired in every case for 100% of what you can do with it. Like there may be like parachains or cosmos zones that will, for any reason, they may like restrict composability. For example, they may just whitelist some assets that are already proven and that are not toxic, or they may like um, restrict the way how smart contracts from other like chains operate within their own parachain or zone, just because they think that maybe the security is higher priority than full composability. Right now on Ethereum, you don't really have the choice too much. I mean, you can do some things, but um, sometimes being fully composable means that you are exposed to all the external risks you cannot really control, and then when something big fails, there is this cascading effect of shocks inside the system which you cannot really escape, and that will affect you with fees growing, liquidations, some prices may lose back and stuff like that. Um, so I'm not saying that we should abandon like composability. No, like I think it's one of the biggest features of the space, but there will be trade-offs, and some of them won't be like 100% skewed towards like the most composability.
I would like to go back to what you said a bit earlier about the future or the end game of blockchains kind of being that there's like one relay chain, and it doesn't have to be like the relay chain of Polkadot or of Ethereum 2 or whatever, but the idea that you have a lot of depth chains around that, right? Because the developers really want to control the experience. And as I understand it, Substrate is basically a blockchain builder, right? It's almost like plug and play, right? Where developers can select from different features and parameters and kind of build their own blockchain and control the experience of their users much more than they can today on Ethereum. And I increasingly think that Ethereum is going to go in that direction as well. So we only mentioned Polkadot and Cosmos, but I think that Ethereum is going in the same direction due to rollups. So there's still the very prevalent narrative that the rollup game is almost like winner take all, right? It's like there will be one big rollup, and the projects that coordinate on that rollup, right? And all the projects will be on there in order to maintain their composability with each other. But I think there's also this completely opposite view of how it could play out, and that is that rollups are Ethereum's version of app chains, where many apps will have their own rollup, and they will be able to customize it. And I actually like, after learning more about how rollups work and what actually their like kind of drawbacks are, especially with regards to the security model, I think that that's actually the far more likely variant, that it's going to play out that way. I'd be interested in hearing like how you apply like these views to Ethereum.
From my, like, let's say, business point of view, I'm not sure how to call it better. There is not really that big of a difference between side chains, alternative chains, and L2s. Like, all of them require some sort of bridging, some way how to interact with the chain you start off from. And then, there are different technical trade-offs and scalability features, and like all the things you can kind of develop on top of them. And it's probably more of a semantic debate, like if the particular thing is sidechain or L2. XDAI chain works quite well. It's pretty centralized, but it's good enough for like some projects to kind of scale into. Some of them may even span multiple ecosystems. Some may have optimistic rollup base and also be on Moonbeam or on Polkadot. Like I can see this developing further. Like definitely some applications will span into multiple directions at once, and then they will just see what sticks. Um, but yeah, definitely Ethereum, even like without Ethereum 2.0 vision, without this like full sharding, which would be very close to Polkadot, Ethereum can remain a dominant player just thanks to rollups, just thanks to sidechains and bridges to other networks as well. And like even if like Polkadot or Cosmos, like let's say version of the future will be dominant, there is still like a good possibility that major player will still be Ethereum. It will become, let's say, a major Cosmos hub, right? With a lot of activity, a lot of liquidity on top of it. And if it bridges into Cosmos ecosystem, it can like suck out a lot of activity into it. And just it already happened. It's already happening today. There are some projects which are already being used on Cosmos ecosystem, like Terra, and Terra is bridging into Ethereum, and the stablecoins that Terra offers and some other synthetic assets are also being used on Ethereum right now. So from my understanding, if it doesn't mean that when we say that this is the future, like Polkadot is the future, like it's bearish for Ethereum. It will change the landscape, but it can change it in a way that even helps Ethereum to take off the pressure from the gas fees a bit, while maintaining the things Ethereum excels at, which is like quick experimentation with a lot of highly interoperable and composable like projects.
I think that, as I said before, that like all these whether it's Polkadot, Cosmos, or ETH 2.0, like these are just like I think they're in essence sort of converging on a similar vision, right? And it's just a race. I don't know if you remember, but there was a controversy with Afri when he once tweeted like Serenity or ETH 2.0, like or Polka delivers what ETH 2.0 should deliver, right? So basically, he was right in a way, right? Like these are very similar sort of goals, and in a way, you could think of it as a race, right? Like who gets there first and who offers this interoperability, scalability, whatever you want to call it, first. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know how it will end. Obviously, I just think that. Like they're like these ecosystems are not like mutually exclusive, right? It's not like it's going to be one or the other. I think that the problem with Ethereum is that in a way it is a victim of its early success, right? Because there's a ton of infrastructure or sort of apps value on it, right? Locked in Ethereum's DeFi, etc. So, and I think that that kind of not only adds pressure, but sort of um, do these upgrades break sort of composability, or the break existing kind of infra, existing smart contracts, etc. So I think that for them, it's like for Ethereum, it's very difficult to kind of to experiment at this stage, right? So Polkadot, Cosmos, they probably sort of can be more take more liberty with experimenting rather than just being very careful.
With regards to L2s, there is one thing I forgot to mention, and this is like zero knowledge proofs in general. I would say that they can change how all this works very drastically in a way that are very hard to foresee right now. But all like every like opinion and thesis I personally have about application specific chains and layer ones, I think it can all be like changed dramatically if zero knowledge proofs will be more developed, and we will solve the computational intensity of them. So this is like let's say black horse of scalability and infrastructure topic of blockchains. Like if we somehow um, make some breakthrough in using zero knowledge proofs, we can throw all the rest of the stuff we are like talking about right now out of the window. So this will be interesting to see in maybe next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see because there's a lot of different things going on now in, I guess, what I would call like deep tech primitives in crypto, where we don't we don't know how it's going to play out because it's a narrowband phase of DeFi. So like everything is super narrowband. We're really feeling the narrowband of Ethereum now, and we can kind of all imagine how great it would be if it was just broadband. But we don't know what broadband will look like, and we also don't know how value will accrue to the things that bring broadband. So like, ETH, the fees weren't really high, and now all the layer ones are going up a ton because people are like, well, if these things can bring scaling, if these things can help solve, then that would be great, right? So AVAX, Near, Dot, Kusama, and like Cosmos as well. The past few days have been doing extremely well off of that. And I do agree with you guys too, which is that it's actually better for Ethereum in the long run if sort of many other smart contract chains are trying to solve the issue of scaling, because they can learn a lot from these approaches, right? I think a lot of the ETH2 roadmap has changed from seeing what has been explored on other chains.
Yeah.
And I also think too that it just gives it a lot of vitality, and it gives it a lot of robustness to the process. So right now it's really interesting to see on ETH layer 2 where you have like optimistic roadmap, and then you also have like the ZK sync roadmap, and the trade-offs there are like quite different. um, and I think a lot of teams are now like looking at Polkadot, they're looking at Cosmos, but it's still very early days as well. So I kind of see it as like it's very difficult if you're trying to build on Ethereum right now, and the frustration is real among a lot of the application teams. Like we've invested in app teams where they have to delay mainnet because there's just absolutely no way they can get users to kind of interact with it, right? And there's this big dark horse, which is, I mean, I think the real dark horse has been BSC, right? Where they've just come in and said, okay, like even though basically a POA, it's basically a proof of authority, but they said, well, it's almost like Ethereum, it's almost like DeFi, and then a lot of people are going and playing with Pancake Swap and kind of things. And I think Andre, he said during a Clubhouse um, talk, he said like, if you're a DeFi builder today, just build on BSC. Like, don't wait for layer two. Like, don't do this. Just put it out on BSC, and then at least you'll have something that people actually use for now. Because it costs you like 15K to deploy smart contracts on Ethereum right now, and the parachain auctions, they're still ongoing, and it's in terms of the spirit of like the grassroots experimentation. My fear is that Ethereum will lose that for a while, and so hopefully with layer two it'll come back. But um, I do agree that I think ZK uh, would be a very strong approach in the long term, but the tech is still very new. So I do generally see the next few months as like kind of a very volatile period in the whole application layer one space. There's some people I speak to that predicting dot flipping of ETH. There's others talking about Solana flipping of ETH and all these kind of things. I mean, I generally don't buy into this kind of stuff as much, like, because I think Ethereum has a massive network effect from the ERC20 network effect, and just from the MetaMask and usability and composability and developer mindshare. I think that's a massive network effect, and I think Ethereum actually benefits net from the idea that blockchains are actually useful and that people are actually using Web3. It's actually the biggest beneficiary like of it. I think to even the detriment of Bitcoin, in that sense.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think Ethereum can maintain itself for a long time by being like a place, a settlement layer, and a layer for very high value use cases. But that shows very nicely how Ethereum benefits from all these other chains, because if Ethereum is only for high value use cases, then where is the place where people actually use a blockchain for the first time, or developers actually deploy a blockchain project for the first time? It can no longer be on Ethereum. Maybe, right? I mean, maybe it can be on a layer two, but more likely it will be on something that uses is basically a copy of Ethereum, but is more centralized, right? Something like BSC. So it seems like BSC is going the route that kind of Tron tried to go and kind of failed at it almost a little bit, right? I mean, it feels like they are realizing this vision a lot better. At the same time, I think we see now, like, didn't we see a decentralized futures exchange launched straight to layer two? I forgot which one that was, but that must have been a couple months ago, and they are actually posting pretty nice volume.
Yeah, I think you are talking about Perpetual Protocol, which we are like also an early investor. I think we are first money in, actually.
Well, that's actually great. So can you walk us maybe through like their thought process and the challenges of launching straight to a layer two?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they didn't launch straight to layer two. They had a mainnet Ethereum contracts as well. They did an LBP, and then they wanted to like launch straight away, and they realized the gas fees are, especially for trading use case, they are like untenable. Even it was like last year September or something, I guess. And they realized that a lot of these DeFi use cases right now are more passive. You provide LP, maybe you trade some spot from time to time, you yield farm a bit, but when you want to do some more active trading with leverage, which you are usually doing with leverage, you are more active, then the fees will be pretty cannibalizing to your P&L. So they were researching a couple of options, optimistic labs as well, and they were discussing this with me, and then they went to XDAI chain, and the reason is that XDAI chain is also a copy of Ethereum. It's something between proof of authority and proof of stake. Right now, I think it's more leaning towards proof of stake. There are a couple of validators. It's not really too decentralized, but it's good enough for like some proof of concept, kind of bootstrapping of fast DeFi experience. It was working well even before Binance Smart Chain was working well. I remember experimenting with Binance Smart Chain like last year in summer, and the experience was so awful. I like 3 times I thought I lost all my money somehow. So I ran away from it, and maybe I have a negative bias towards it right now because of my past experience. Maybe I missed out on it like in recent days. But XDAI chain was working quite well. There were some other projects porting to it, some NFT projects that are using it right now. Metacartel is also like proponent of XDAI chain for some low value use cases. So yeah, so they just basically tried it, and they made it pretty easy to kind of start trading there. They are seeing pretty nice volume. They are actually, I think, per protocol is actually now responsible for majority of XDAI chain volume already. And yeah, I mean, they still they want to attract more users, so they will release some trading incentives. So the real stress test, I think, is still ahead of them. But I would say that they are one of the best experiments on how to bridge native Ethereum into some other sidechain, which is very similar. And I'm not sure. I don't think they will stay there forever. I think they also will move somewhere else in the future, or maybe they will like span multiple ecosystems as well. But yeah, I think they are early example of this like being viable. They are doing between $30 million or something. I'm not sure now if it's like 30 million or what a day, but yeah, I need to figure it out. But yeah, they are pretty successful in it. Um, I mean, the biggest challenge is to get users using it on the other chain, right?
Where do you guys see the role of Bitcoin in a world of increasing interoperability?
I think that when people talk about Bitcoin and talk about DeFi like this, somehow it's still framed as sort of similar or adjacent, but I think it's a totally different thing. Like Bitcoin is a defensive technology; it's something completely else. And the future probably is something like like Ren has shown or some other bridges. Probably that is the only way to connect it. And I think the DeFi is trying to do something else. Like Bitcoin, as I mentioned, is like a defensive technology. It's going back to the sort of like the I don't want to say Austrian economic foundations, but it's sort of it's Revankist in that respect. Whereas DeFi is trying to kind of ride the wave of the current kind of monetary environment, and it's pushing the boundaries, and it's going to get increasingly kind of disconnected. So we still will see Bitcoin in DeFi, but I do not think that it's related at its core.
I think it's more connected. I think the narrative is like still kind of disrupting traditional finance, and Bitcoin is, let's say, disrupting gold and monetary policy of central banks and maybe fiat a bit. DeFi is disrupting all the rest, like financial services, leveraged products, all that jazz. So I would say they are kind of connected in a way, but they have very different core values, and I think it's good that they do, because we need both. I would say we need to have some bedrock. I would say something that doesn't change too often, that is really like super simple and super stable, and it's here for you whenever you need to just park money somewhere, and just, I don't know, be super sure they are there 5 years later. I think, I mean, Bitcoin has some long-term problems with subsidies and stuff. But other than that, Bitcoin thrives for this value, for this like being hard to change, being reliable for the long run, being simple. While all the other stuff is like, it can change under your feet. It moves fast. You don't know what the next big thing will be, so you are trying to like cover everything and just diversify. Whereas like Bitcoiners, they don't really need to diversify. They have this one simple truth, the one big story that they believe in, and I think it's an important story to have, and to kind of to be able to go back to if, let's say, everything else fails. It's like a backstop. And yeah, I mean, we see tokenized Bitcoin on like being used in DeFi quite heavily as well. So um, I don't think it's going to change too much. But I mean, it's clumsy. It's not something that is super elegant, but it's happening, and market demands it. So market will provide.
I think that the fact that like Bitcoin can get accepted much sooner than DeFi is also kind of key, because I have come to realization that Bitcoin is like has become like a Pascal's wager for many. I mean, for the finance industry in general, whereas DeFi is something like completely divorced from like it is almost a mockery of financial system in a way, and it's like even think about it. How long did it take to like some of the more legitimate uh, investors, like traditional investors, to accept Bitcoin? I mean, still there are only few in, but DeFi, I think that's and I still think that even there, even when they're in Bitcoin, they still don't understand Bitcoin. So it's purely a Pascal's wager for them, and and then try to understand DeFi. and try to explain DeFi to someone who doesn't even understand Bitcoin. I think there's a huge leap. So that's why I think they're totally kind of, I don't want to say divorced, but they're separate things. But I definitely think that Bitcoin will exist in DeFi the same way it exists in CeFi, right? So, but I wouldn't kind of think that like DeFi on Bitcoin and that sort of thing. Like that's, I don't know if that's interesting.
Um, one sad realization I had a couple of weeks ago was when I realized that Bitcoin is actually very CeFi friendly. It's something that needs centralized infrastructure to kind of work well and to get adopted. And now all these banks are realizing it as well. And instead of bashing it and calling it rat poison, they are actually like onboarding Bitcoin custodial services and some other investment services to kind of profit out of Bitcoin, um, even without needing to fully understand it, because it doesn't allow for like independent. You cannot build independent infrastructure on top of Bitcoin right now. And everybody was super hopeful about Lightning Network and how there will be labs like Lightning applications that will be decentralized on top of Lightning. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. There is like 3 years, later, and we still don't have any meaningful use case for Lightning Network. And partially that's problem of incentives, like you cannot really make too much money running Lightning node and farming on Lightning like you would do on DeFi. But I would also say that the tech still has some challenges to overcome before it's really usable for like the mainstream. So Bitcoin as it is right now is pretty, it the product is pretty finished. It's digital store of value. It's simple to understand. Banks can like offer it as a service to their customers, and I don't think it's necessarily bad, but it's definitely not what we are here for. And to see full potential of crypto and decentralized consensus, we kind of need to also look elsewhere while being able to go back to Bitcoin when we need to, when there is some, when there are hard times or something like that.
And maybe one thing that I kind of I didn't say is that there obviously, I mean, we do see like some kind of legacy players like market makers coming into DeFi, right? So there definitely are specific players that do understand the nuance of it, um, and yeah, so it's there are some sort of CeFi players that do get DeFi, but I still think that this might be a Pascal's wager on their side as well. Coming into DeFi and trying to like be on top of these AMM experiments, etc. So yeah.
So do you think that Bitcoin is already mainstream? I think I saw you tweeting something about it, or maybe it was our discussion.
Yeah, I think it's actually very close to, if not already mainstream, in the sense that I think just a few weeks ago I saw something where more people thought Bitcoin could double within a year than people thought Tesla could double within a year. So I think it'd be hard for you to find someone who doesn't know what Bitcoin roughly is these days. Um, Including the latest narrative as well for Bitcoin, which is as a store of value, which has a fixed supply. I think pretty much everyone knows it, and I think that for that reason, like Bitcoin has a relatively safe positioning over the next few years, just because that it has that kind of inflow of people who say, okay, like you said, Pascal's wager, where they think stocks are expensive, they think the things they see in the real world are expensive, so this as a piece of digital scarcity, it seems like it's fairly priced, or it seems like it's accessible to them, and they need to put some percentage in. um, but at the same time, like I recently kind of thinking a lot about the kind of the idea of like of the Mises regression of money, of how monies compete, and thinking about how ether, it is really trying to go at it from a very different angle at this point, right? Where you see massive amounts of ether coming out of exchanges almost every day. The amount of ETH on centralized exchanges at all time lows, and kind of at the same time, like the transactions being paid on Ether on the Ethereum network have gone to incredible to incredible levels. The value transacted on Ether has recently flipped in Bitcoin. And so, like, at the same, I kind of hold these two truths at the same time in my head, and I often debate with the Three Arrows partners about like how is this really going to play out, because also you see in the backdrop of this kind of Bitcoin mainstreamness, you see Ether outperforming relatively, and you see people really get excited about using blockchains and transacting on blockchains, and so there's some part of me that wonders, like, is the Mises regression not over, right? Like, where we are still regressing what is the base money, and people still because ultimately it doesn't matter what OGs own. If a billion people come in the space and they all buy a different coin, that's going to be the money, right? And there is a demand for digital store value. So I think that it'll be power law. It will definitely not be maximalist as it has been since 2017. But I think that Bitcoin Ether kind of back and forth is definitely not over. If you just see how the two approaches are evolving, I think.
That was a great way to end it. Thank you guys so much, Fisky and Matti, for the discussion, and Su for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Pleasure.
It was a pleasure. It was really a pleasure, guys.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Alright guys, that was all for today. What do you think about the questions raised in this episode? Please let us know on Twitter. We love hearing from you. And as always, you can help us out a lot by leaving a rating and review in the podcast app of your choice. Thanks, and see you soon.